Picture this, a small, shimmering beetle carved from brilliant gold, resting in the palm of your hand. It seems so simple, so unassuming. Yet, in the eyes of the ancient Egyptians, this tiny creature held more power, more profound meaning than the mighty lion or the deadly cobra. It was the Egyptian Scarab Beetle, and its story is one of the most captivating mysteries of the ancient world. How could something so common become a symbol of creation, resurrection, and the very journey of the sun itself? This question lies at the heart of a legacy that has endured for millennia, a puzzle wrapped in the gleaming carapace of an insect. Today, we are going to unravel that mystery together, traveling back through time to uncover why this humble beetle was considered a sacred key to understanding life, death, and the cosmos. To truly appreciate the scarab's significance, we have to step away from our modern perspective. We often see beetles as simple insects, perhaps even pests. But the ancient Egyptians observed the world with a different kind of vision, one that saw the divine in the everyday. They noticed the dung beetle tirelessly rolling its ball of dung across the ground. In that simple, determined action, they saw a powerful metaphor. The ball was like the sun moving across the sky. The beetle, pushing it from east to west, was a living representation of Khepri, the god of the rising sun, who renewed the world each dawn. This connection between the earthly and the celestial is where the magic of the scarab begins. It wasn't just an insect, it was a miniature god, a cosmic force made visible, demonstrating that the greatest mysteries of the universe could be found in the smallest details of life. The reverence for the scarab went far beyond mere observation. It became woven into the very fabric of Egyptian belief, especially concerning the afterlife. For the Egyptians, death was not an end, but a transition, a dangerous journey to a new beginning. The scarab, with its miraculous life cycle of apparently being reborn from a ball of dung, became the ultimate symbol of this transformation. A scarab amulet, often inscribed with spells from the Book of the Dead, was placed over the heart of a mummy. It was believed to protect the soul, to silence a guilty heart during the final judgment, and to ensure a successful rebirth, just as the beetle was reborn each day with the sun. This small object carried the weight of eternity. So, as we begin this exploration, we are not just looking at a piece of jewelry or an archaeological artifact. We are unlocking a doorway into the ancient Egyptian mind. We will discover how a single symbol could embody the cycle of the sun, the promise of resurrection, and the protection of the soul. We will see how it was used by pharaohs and commoners alike, and why its power resonates even today. This is a journey into a world where the mundane and the miraculous were one and the same, a world where a tiny beetle held the secrets of the universe. Get ready to see this ancient icon in a completely new light as we decode the profound and enduring symbolism of the Egyptian scarab beetle. Now, let's meet the star of our story in its natural habitat. The insect we're talking about is the dung beetle, a creature that spends its days quite literally in the dirt. To our modern sensibilities, this might seem like an odd choice for a divine symbol. But the ancient Egyptians were masterful observers of the natural world, and they saw something extraordinary in the beetle's unwavering routine. Every day, this beetle would set to work, shaping a perfect sphere from animal dung. With immense determination, it would then begin to push this ball backwards using its powerful hind legs, rolling it across the ground to a safe burial spot. This wasn't just a meal for later, it was the cradle for the next generation. The female beetle would lay a single egg inside the ball, and within this nutrient-rich nursery, a new beetle would develop, eventually emerging fully formed from the substance that had nourished it. From the Egyptians' perspective, this was nothing short of a miracle. Here was a creature that was born from what seemed like decay, appearing spontaneously from a ball of waste, as if creating life from nothingness. It was a daily, visible demonstration of transformation and rebirth happening right before their eyes. This powerful observation in the natural world directly shaped their understanding of the cosmos. They saw a parallel they could not ignore. Just as the dung beetle rolled its ball across the earth, their sun god Ra journeyed across the sky each day. But there was a mystery. How did the sun reappear each morning after its nightly journey through the underworld? The answer, they believed, was personified by a specific aspect of the sun god known as Khepri. The name Khepri itself means he who comes into being, and he was depicted as a man with a scarab beetle for a head, or sometimes as the beetle itself. Khepri was the god of the rising sun, the divine force that pushed the solar disk up from the darkness, renewing it and setting it on its daily path. So the humble dung beetle, through its daily toil, became a living, breathing symbol of the god who ensured the sun would rise again, bringing light, warmth, and life back to the world. The beetle's ball of dung was the sun, and its arduous journey mirrored the sun's celestial voyage. This connection transformed a common insect into a sacred embodiment of creation itself, linking the earthly to the heavenly in one of the most profound and elegant metaphors ever conceived by an ancient civilization. This direct parallel between the beetle's labor and the sun's voyage solidified Khepri's role as a fundamental force of existence. He was not merely a sun god in the general sense, he was the specific agent of the sun's daily renaissance. Each morning, as the first sliver of light broke over the horizon, the Egyptians saw Khepri at work, tirelessly pushing the solar disk into the sky, much like the beetle heaving its burden up and over a small hill. This act was not passive, it was an immense exertion of divine will, a continuous victory over the chaos and darkness of the night. The scarab, therefore, became more than just a symbol, it was a participant in this cosmic drama. Its very existence on Earth was a testament to the reliability of the cycle. By simply going about its life, the dung beetle reaffirmed the universe's order, a concept the Egyptians called Mat. It demonstrated that creation was not a one-time event lost in a distant past, but an ongoing process repeated every single day. This idea of perpetual renewal extended far beyond the solar cycle. It touched everything from the annual flooding of the Nile, which brought fertile soil and life back to the land, to the human journey through death and into the afterlife. The scarab's symbolism provided a powerful, tangible model for this belief in cyclical regeneration. It offered hope and a clear, observable pattern. Just as the sun sets only to rise again, and just as the beetle emerges from the earth, so too could the human soul be reborn. This made the scarab an incredibly potent and comforting emblem, connecting the grandest cosmic events to the most intimate human hopes for eternity. This concept of a self-generated creator takes us straight to the very beginning of everything, according to ancient Egyptian belief. To understand Khepri's unique power, we have to envision a time before time, a state of existence known as none. None was the primordial, dark, and endless ocean of chaos that existed before creation. It was a void of limitless potential, but without form or order. From this watery nothingness, the first god was believed to have emerged, bringing the universe into being. And for one of the most prominent creation myths centered in the city of Heliopolis, that first god was Autumn. But here is where Khepri's role becomes absolutely fascinating. Autumn was not just one god with a single identity, he was a god of many aspects, embodying the entire cycle of the sun. Autumn was the setting sun, the aged god of the evening. Ra was the full, blazing sun at its zenith at midday, and Khepri was the dawning sun, the youthful, emerging force of the morning. Crucially, Khepri was not seen as a separate deity created by Autumn. He was Autumn in his morning form. He was the manifestation of Autumn's power to create himself anew each day. The name Khepri, meaning he who comes into being or he who is coming into existence, perfectly captures this idea. He was the act of creation itself, the moment something comes from nothing. Now let's bring the scarab beetle back into the picture. The Egyptians' observation of the insect seemed to be a perfect, real-world echo of this divine mystery. They saw the adult dung beetles pushing their balls along the ground, but they also witnessed the next stage. They would see young scarab beetles fully formed crawling out of the buried dung balls. Without the scientific understanding of the egg being laid inside, this appeared to be a clear case of spontaneous generation. To them, the new beetle was born directly from the inert, lifeless matter of the dung ball, just as Khepri autumn had emerged from the inert, lifeless waters of Nun. The dung ball was the beetle's own personal Nun, a microcosm of the primordial chaos from which life miraculously sprang. This wasn't just a convenient analogy, it was a profound theological confirmation. The beetle's life cycle provided tangible proof that their creation myth was a fundamental law of the universe, observable in nature. The God who created himself from nothing was not a distant, abstract concept. His power was at work all around them in the most humble of creatures. This reinforced Khepri's status as a god of ultimate beginnings, linking the cosmic act of universal creation to the daily miracle of the sunrise and the simple, yet astounding, emergence of life from what seemed like death and decay. And this profound belief in rebirth, mirrored by the beetle and the sun god, found its most critical and personal application in the journey of the human soul. The Egyptians did not see death as a final stop, but as a perilous passage to an eternal life that mirrored their own world, provided they could successfully navigate the divine judgment that awaited them. This is where the scarab amulet, specifically the powerful Heart Scarab, became an essential companion for the deceased. These were not mere decorative items, they were functional, magical objects carefully crafted and ritually charged to perform a very specific life or death task in the afterlife. Typically carved from dark green stones like basalt or serpentine, materials symbolizing fertility and new life, or from brilliant green feldspar, the Heart Scarab was a relatively large amulet, often measuring several inches long. It was always inscribed on its flat underside with a spell, usually chapter 30 from the Book of the Dead, and it was placed directly over the heart of the mummified body, sometimes even being sewn into the mummy's wrappings or replacing the heart itself. But why the heart? In ancient Egyptian thought, the heart was not just a physical organ. It was the seat of a person's intellect, their memory, their emotions, and most importantly, their moral character. It was the record of every action, every word, and every thought from a person's entire life. This made it the most vital piece of evidence in the ultimate courtroom, the Hall of Two Truths, where the final judgment, known as the weighing of the heart, would take place. In this solemn ceremony, the deceased would be led by the god Anubis before a tribunal of deities. The central moment involved Anubis placing the individual's heart on one side of a giant, precise scale. On the other side was the feather of Maat, which represented truth, justice, and the cosmic order. The heart had to be in perfect balance with the feather for the soul to pass into the afterlife. If the heart was heavy with the weight of sin, misdeeds, and lies, if it tipped the scale, a terrifying beast known as Ammit, the devourer, part lion, part hippopotamus, part crocodile, would immediately consume it, resulting in a second, permanent death from which there was no return. This was the ultimate fear, but the Heart Scarab was the ultimate defense. Its primary magical function was to act as a substitute for the heart during this judgment. The inscribed spell on its back was a direct plea, a command to the heart itself, not to bear witness against its owner. It was a ritual of silencing, of preventing the heart from revealing any negative or sinful acts the person may have committed in life. The spell often began with words like, "O my heart of my mother, O my heart of my mother, do not stand up against me as a witness." This was a powerful piece of sympathetic magic. By placing the silent, lifeless stone scarab over the living, speaking heart, the Egyptians believed they could transfer its qualities of silence and obedience onto the actual organ. The scarab, a symbol of rebirth and transformation, would help transform a potentially guilty, heavy heart into one as light and pure as the feather of mat. The brilliance of this practice lies in how it wove together multiple layers of symbolism into a single, potent object. The scarab was not chosen at random for this role. Its connection to Khepri and the daily rebirth of the sun meant it carried the inherent promise of renewal. Just as the sun god was reborn each morning after his journey through the dangerous underworld, the deceased, aided by the scarab, hoped to be reborn after their own perilous journey. Furthermore, the beetle's action of rolling its ball was seen as a metaphor for the soul's journey pushing forward through adversity toward a new beginning. The green stone from which it was often carved evoked the lush vegetation that sprung up after the Nile's flood, another powerful symbol of life conquering death. So the Heart Scarab was far more than a simple good luck charm. It was a multifaceted tool, a legal advocate, a magical silencer, and a cosmic symbol of hope. It encapsulated the entire Egyptian world, the importance of morality, the fear of divine judgment, and the fervent hope for eternal life, all contained within the form of the humble, yet divinely powerful Scarab Beetle. For the ancient Egyptians, securing a favorable judgment was not just about avoiding punishment. It was about affirming that they had lived a life in harmony with Maat, the universal order. The Heart Scarab was their key to achieving that balance, ensuring their heart would not betray them and that they could join the gods in the eternal cycle of the sun. The words carved into the stone were not a simple prayer or a hopeful wish. They were a precise and potent magical formula, a set of commands believed to hold real power in the afterlife. The inscription found on the underside of so many heart scarabs is a specific version of a spell known to Egyptologists as Chapter 30b of the Book of the Dead. This chapter was one of the most crucial spells a person could take with them into the next world, and its presence on the scarab transformed the amulet into an active participant in the judgment process. The text itself is a direct, almost urgent address to the heart. It typically begins with a powerful and repeated invocation, "O my heart of my mother." O my heart of my mother, O my heart of my different forms. This opening is deeply significant. The phrase, "heart of my mother," is a poetic way of referring to the heart as one's essential, original being, perhaps connecting it to the creator goddess who gave life. By naming the heart's different forms, the spell seeks to command every aspect of the individual's character and conscience. The core instruction of the spell follows this invocation, and its purpose is unmistakably clear. The deceased commands their own heart, "Do not stand up against me as a witness, do not oppose me in the tribunal, do not show hostility against me before the keeper of the scales." Imagine the scene in the Hall of Two Truths, a moment of unbearable tension where the heart, the repository of a lifetime of memories, could reveal a single misdeed that would tip the scales toward damnation. The spell's objective was to prevent this betrayal from within. It was a magical act of persuasion and control aimed at silencing the heart's testimony. The text often continues with pleas like, "Do not tell lies about me in the presence of the god," and "Do not make my name stink to the entourage who make men." This last part is particularly revealing. It shows a concern not just with the verdict of the gods, but also with social standing in the afterlife. The deceased wanted to be seen as righteous by the divine court and by the community of blessed spirits they hoped to join. The words were a safeguard against shame and rejection on every level. But this magic wasn't just about suppression, it was also about transformation and alliance. The spell frequently contains lines intended to create a bond of solidarity between the deceased and their heart. It might say, "It is who we are who will be glad," or "You are my car," identifying the heart with the spiritual double or vital force of a person. This was a way of aligning their interests, reminding the heart that its own fate was tied to the success of its owner. The final part of the inscription often serves to affirm the scarab's own power and legitimacy. A common conclusion is a phrase like, "As for this spell, it is true. 1,000,000 times it has been tested." This was not just boasting, it was a standard magical practice meant to activate the spell by stating its proven efficacy. By declaring the words to be true and tested, the inscription locked in their power, ensuring the spell would function as intended. The act of inscribing these precise words onto a scarab, an object already brimming with solar and regenerative symbolism, compounded the magic exponentially. The stone amulet became a permanent, unchangeable record of this powerful command. Unlike a spoken spell that might fade from memory, the inscribed words were eternally present, ready to speak on behalf of the deceased the moment they faced the ultimate test. This fusion of object and text created a perfect magical tool, one that harnessed the scarab's natural symbolism of rebirth and focused it through the precise, commanding language of a spell designed to cheat oblivion. It was the ancient Egyptian equivalent of having the perfect, pre-written speech for the most important job interview of all eternity, etched onto the one object that embodied a second chance. But the power of a scarab amulet was not just in its shape or its inscription. It was also deeply embedded in the very substance from which it was carved. The ancient Egyptians possessed a sophisticated understanding of materials, believing that the essence of a stone or metal carried its own inherent magical properties. This meant that the choice of material for a scarab was a deliberate decision, one that reflected the owner's wealth, social standing, and the specific spiritual power they wished to invoke. For the vast majority of people, the most common material was steatite, a soft, easily carved stone also known as soapstone. But an ordinary grey steatite scarab was rarely left in its natural state. After being carved into its iconic form, it was typically coated with a powdered glaze and then fired in a kiln. This process transformed the dull stone into a brilliant, lustrous object, most often taking on a vibrant blue or green hue. The color was everything. This brilliant turquoise or deep green was meant to emulate the life-giving waters of the Nile and the lush vegetation that sprouted after the annual flood. It connected the scarab directly to themes of fertility, rebirth, and regeneration, making it an ideal, accessible material for the everyday person seeking protection in the afterlife. These glazed steatite scarabs were produced in enormous quantities, almost like mass-produced sacred items, ensuring that even citizens of modest means could afford this essential key to eternity. For those higher up the social ladder, the materials became progressively more precious and symbolically charged. Officials and wealthy nobles might commission scarabs from beautiful, naturally colored semi-precious stones. Carnelian, with its warm, rich red-orange color, was a popular choice. The Egyptians associated this hue with blood, life, and the potent power of the sun, making it a stone of vitality and protection. A deep red carnelian scarab was thought to harness the fiery energy of the sun god himself. Another highly prized material was lapis lazuli, imported from far-off Afghanistan. Its intense celestial blue, often flecked with golden specks of pyrite that resembled stars, made it the perfect symbol of the night sky and the cosmic realm of the gods. A scarab made from lapis lazuli was not just an amulet, it was a piece of the heavens connecting the wearer directly to the divine. Other stones like green feldspar, which mirrored the color of new growth, or red jasper, another solar stone, were also used for their specific symbolic resonances. The durability of these hard stones also held meaning. Unlike glazed steatite, which could chip or craze over time, a scarab carved from carnelian or lapis was meant to last for eternity, just like the soul it was protecting. The choice of material was a careful balancing act between symbolic meaning, magical function, and a public display of one's status and piety. At the very pinnacle of society, the material of choice for a scarab was unmistakable: gold. For the pharaoh and the highest elites, gold was more than a display of extreme wealth. It was a divine substance. The Egyptians believed the flesh of the gods was made of gold, and its incorruptible nature, it never tarnished or rusted, made it the ultimate symbol of eternal life. A gold scarab was therefore the most potent version possible. It embodied the sun disk itself, shining with an undiminished brilliance that echoed the eternal cycle of rebirth. Some of the most spectacular examples of royal scarabs have been found in the tombs of pharaohs, like the magnificent pectoral of Tutankhamun, which features a large, winged scarab carved from a single piece of vibrant yellow Libyan desert glass, set amidst elaborate goldwork and inlays of lapis and carnelian. This masterpiece is a perfect symphony of materials, each element contributing its own power: the gold of the gods, the lapis of the cosmos, the carnelian of the sun, and the scarab form of creation. But royal scarabs served another purpose beyond the tomb. Pharaohs also commissioned large commemorative scarabs, often made of glazed steatite but on a grand scale, to celebrate important events of their reigns, a military victory, the building of a temple, or even a royal marriage. These were not funerary items but political tools, distributed throughout the kingdom to proclaim the king's achievements and his divine connection to the gods. The humble beetle, fashioned in materials ranging from common glazed stone to divine gold, became a versatile symbol that functioned on every level of Egyptian society, from the most personal hope for resurrection to the grandest expressions of royal power and divine kingship. While the protective heart scarab was a deeply personal object for the afterlife, the beetle's symbolic power was also harnessed for a much more public and political purpose, transforming it into a tool of royal authority. The most famous examples of this are the large commemorative scarabs produced in great numbers during the reign of the 18th dynasty, Pharaoh Amenhotep III. These were not small amulets meant for a mummy's breast. They were substantial objects, often measuring several inches long, crafted from glazed steatite and intricately inscribed on their flat undersides. But instead of a spell to silence the heart, these scarabs bore official proclamations, acting as a sophisticated form of mass media in an age without newspapers or the internet. They were, in essence, the ancient world's equivalent of a press release, designed to broadcast the pharaoh's power and piety to every corner of his empire. Amenhotep III was a master of this propaganda technique, using these scarabs to cement his image as a divinely blessed, prosperous, and invincible ruler. The topics chosen for these scarab announcements were carefully curated to highlight specific aspects of his kingship that he wanted to emphasize. One of the earliest series celebrated his prowess as a warrior and protector of Egypt. These scarabs boast of a truly monumental achievement: a great lion hunt where the pharaoh himself, in the first 10 years of his reign, claimed to have slaughtered 102 wild lions. For an Egyptian audience, this was not a tale of mere sport. The lion was a symbol of chaos and danger, a creature of the untamed desert that threatened the ordered world of the Nile Valley. By portraying himself as the triumphant hunter, Amenhotep was performing his fundamental duty as pharaoh: to defeat the forces of chaos and maintain the cosmic order. The specific, large number was a deliberate detail, meant to convey not just bravery but an overwhelming, almost superhuman capability. It was a message to both his people and potential rivals: your king is a force of nature, capable of securing the nation's safety through his own divine strength. Another famous series of these scarabs reveals a different, more personal side of his rule, one focused on grandeur, luxury, and his relationship with his powerful great royal wife, Queen Tiye. One proclamation describes the creation of a vast, artificial pleasure lake for the queen, measuring more than 3,700 feet long and 700 feet wide. The text recounts how, in the 11th year of his reign, the pharaoh ordered this enormous lake to be dug in just 15 days, after which he and Queen Tiye sailed upon it in a royal barge named the Dazzling Sun Disk. This was a brilliant piece of messaging. On one level, it showcased the pharaoh's wealth and his ability to command nature itself for the comfort and delight of his court. But on a deeper level, it reinforced the stability and abundance of his reign. A project of such scale, undertaken not for defense or agriculture but for pure leisure, signaled a kingdom so secure and prosperous that its ruler could engage in such magnificent displays. Furthermore, by highlighting Queen Tiye by name, Amenhotep was elevating her status to an unprecedented degree, signaling that she was a core part of his royal authority and not merely a consort. Perhaps the most strategically significant use of the commemorative scarab was for diplomatic announcements. Amenhotep III maintained a vast network of international relations, and he used scarabs to publicize his diplomatic marriages to princesses from neighboring powers such as Mitanni and Babylon. In an age where royal marriages were a primary tool of foreign policy, these scarabs served to impress upon both domestic and international audiences the extent of Egypt's influence. They communicated that powerful foreign kings were willing to send their daughters to the Egyptian court, a sign of respect and submission to Pharaoh's might. The scarab, with its solar connections to the pharaoh's own divinity, was the perfect medium for this message. It framed these political unions not as simple treaties between equals, but as acts of homage to the living sun god on earth. The widespread distribution of these inscribed beetles ensured that the news of the pharaoh's glory, whether martial, architectural, or diplomatic, would be carried by officials and travelers, reaching the elite in distant provinces and even beyond Egypt's borders. In this way, the humble scarab, a symbol of creation and rebirth, was ingeniously repurposed. It became the durable, sacred carrier of a pharaoh's legacy, ensuring that his achievements would be remembered not just in the afterlife, but in the here and now, solidifying his legend for generations to come. Moving from the grand political statements of royal scarabs, we find these symbols embedded even deeper into the fabric of daily life, serving purposes that were both profoundly practical and magically potent. Beyond the tomb and the palace, the scarab took on a role familiar to us today, that of a personal signature and a security device. For countless officials, merchants, and even skilled artisans, a small scaraboid seal, often shaped like a scarab but sometimes as a simple oval, was an essential personal possession. The genius of its design lay in its combination of form and function. The curved back was easy to hold and roll, while the flat underside was a miniature canvas for intricate carving. This base would be meticulously inscribed in reverse with an individual's name, their official title, or a short protective motto or symbol. When this carved surface was pressed into a lump of soft clay affixed to a jar stopper, a door latch, or the tied strings of a papyrus document, it left a clear, positive impression. This seal acted as a tamper-proof lock. If the clay was broken, it was immediately obvious that the contents had been accessed, providing a basic but effective form of security for goods, rooms, and important correspondence. This practice turned administration into an act imbued with magical significance. The choice of the scarab shape for these seals was not arbitrary. By using an object that symbolized transformation and divine protection, every act of sealing became more than just a bureaucratic procedure. It was a ritual. Sealing a storage jar of grain with a scarab seal wasn't only about preventing theft. It was about invoking the beetle's power to protect the contents from decay or spoilage, ensuring the sustenance within would nourish life, just as the sun nourished the world. Similarly, sealing a document with a scarab was a way of placing it under the watchful eye of a protective force, sanctifying the agreement or message it contained. The symbols carved on the base often amplified this effect. Alongside a name like Amenemhat, overseer of granaries, a craftsman might include a tiny figure of the god Bes, a dwarf deity who warded off evil spirits, or an ankh, the symbol of life. This fused the owner's professional identity with a plea for divine safeguarding, making the seal a permanent, repeatable prayer for prosperity and order in their worldly affairs. The distribution of these seals reveals a society deeply invested in both personal identity and magical security. While high-ranking officials had seals made from fine stones like hematite or lapis lazuli, The average scribe or tradesperson would have used one made of cheaper steatite or faience. Yet, regardless of the material's value, the function was the same. Archaeologists have found thousands of these clay ceilings called bulli in the ruins of palaces, tombs, and even modest workshops. Each broken piece of clay tells a story of a transaction completed, a room secured, or a message sent. They are the fragile, fossilized echoes of daily life in ancient Egypt. A ceiling on a jar in a tomb, for instance, might bear the name of the estate that produced the wine, the official who certified its quality, and the funerary priest who placed it as an offering. This creates a detailed chain of custody, all authenticated by the personal scarab seals of the individuals involved. The scarab, therefore, operated on 3 simultaneous levels. It was a practical tool for commerce and control, a marker of individual identity and social status, and a portable object of faith that brought the protective power of the gods into the most mundane moments of existence. It beautifully demonstrates how, for the Egyptians, there was no clear division between the spiritual and the practical. The sacred scarab that guided souls through the underworld was the very same object that kept a merchant's accounts safe and a family's food supply secure. While the Heart Scarab was focused on the critical moment of judgment, another spectacular form of the beetle was dedicated to safeguarding the entire perilous journey that came before and after. This is the winged scarab, a breathtaking symbol of mobility and transcendent protection. Often crafted as a large pectoral ornament to be placed on the chest of the mummy or painted in vivid colors on the interior lid of a coffin, this image is instantly recognizable. The central scarab beetle, its body gleaming with gold or semi-precious stones, is fitted with the outstretched protective wings of a falcon or a vulture. This fusion of symbols was not a random artistic choice. It was a meticulously designed spiritual technology for the afterlife. The journey through the Juwat, the Egyptian underworld, was not a simple path. It was a labyrinthine realm filled with treacherous gates, lakes of fire, and demonic creatures that sought to halt the soul's progress. To reach the Hall of Judgment and achieve rebirth, the deceased needed more than just a pure heart. They needed the ability to move, to overcome obstacles, and to ascend. The wings provided this essential capability. They symbolized the soul's transformation into a mobile, bird-like spirit, capable of flying over dangers, speeding through the dark corridors of the underworld, and ultimately soaring towards the realm of the gods. This concept of winged transformation connects directly to other fundamental Egyptian beliefs about the soul's components. The Egyptians believed a person was made of several distinct spiritual parts, and one of the most important was the Ba. The Ba is often translated as the personality or soul manifestation, and it was depicted as a human-headed bird. During the day, the Ba was thought to be able to leave the tomb and fly freely in the world of the living, but it had to return to the mummified body each night for sustenance. The winged scarab can be seen as a powerful, combined symbol that unites the regenerative power of the scarab with the mobile freedom of the Ba. The beetle ensures the core promise of rebirth, while the wings grant the means to navigate the journey required to achieve it. Placing this symbol on the mummy's chest was like providing a spiritual vehicle. It was an assurance that the soul would not be earthbound or trapped, but would possess the agility and speed needed to successfully traverse the Juwat. The choice of bird wings was also deeply significant. Falcon wings evoked the god Horus, the sky deity, and represented swift, high-flying ascension towards the sun. Vulture wings, associated with the protective goddesses Nekhbit and Mut, offered a motherly, shielding embrace against the hostile forces of the underworld. Thus, the winged scarab offered a dual guarantee: the relentless forward momentum of the sun beetle and the elevated, protected flight of a divine bird. These pectorals were among the most elaborate and beautiful items created for the tomb. A stunning example is the winged scarab pectoral found on the mummy of the young pharaoh Tutankhamun. Crafted from gold, silver, and inlays of vibrant lapis lazuli, carnelian, and turquoise, it is a masterpiece of the jeweler's art. The central scarab is carved from a large, polished piece of green chalcedony, a stone that captures the essence of new life. Its outstretched wings are meticulously detailed with feathers, and the entire piece is suspended from a necklace of gold beads and lotus flowers, but its beauty was secondary to its function. This was not merely jewelry, it was a functional piece of sacred armor, positioned directly over the mummy's heart, and thus directly over the heart scarab that lay beneath the wrappings. The winged scarab formed the outer, visible layer of the soul's defense system. It was the engine for the journey, while the heart scarab was the key to the final destination. The brilliance of its materials also played a role. The gold connected the pharaoh to the gods, the lapis lazuli to the starry night sky he must travel through, and the green scarab to the promise of renewal. When priests placed this object on the king's chest, they were activating a complex set of symbolic associations, all designed to guide and protect him. For wealthy nobles, similar, if less lavish, versions were created, showing that the desire for a protected, mobile afterlife was a universal hope, not just a royal privilege. The enduring image of the winged scarab, found in tombs for centuries, is a powerful testament to the ancient Egyptian understanding that resurrection was not a passive event. It was an active, difficult voyage that required divine assistance at every turn, and they ensured their dead were equipped with the most powerful symbol of safe passage they could conceive, a beetle born of the sun, now gifted with the wings to fly home. Beyond the solemn confines of the tomb and the administrative world of official seals, the scarab's influence extended into the most intimate sphere of daily life, personal adornment. For the ancient Egyptians, jewelry was never just about vanity. It was a portable treasury of magical power, and the scarab was one of its most popular and potent elements. Men, women, and even children would wear scarab rings, necklaces, and bracelets not as simple decorations, but as constant, wearable sources of protection and vitality. Imagine an Egyptian noblewoman fastening a bracelet of gold and turquoise beads, its centerpiece a glistening green feldspar scarab. As she went about her day, this was not a passive accessory. It was a dynamic shield, a continuous connection to the divine energy of the sun god. Each time the sunlight caught the polished stone, it was a visible reminder of Khepri's daily rebirth, and by wearing it, she was aligning herself with that cycle of renewal, hoping to absorb its life-giving power for her own health and well-being. This practice transformed personal fashion into a form of daily devotion and practical magic. The types of scarab jewelry were as varied as their intended purposes. One of the most common and personal forms was the scarab ring. These were not rings as we think of them today with a fixed bezel. Instead, they typically featured a scarab mounted on a swivel. The beetle itself was drilled through its longitudinal axis and mounted on a wire that passed through it, allowing it to spin freely. The flat underside, the plaque, could be intricately carved with the owner's name, a protective deity like Bes or Taweret, a powerful symbol like the Ankh or a brief prayer. This design was brilliantly functional. When worn, the smooth, curved back of the scarab faced outward, presenting a beautiful, symbolic ornament. But when needed, the wearer could simply spin the beetle to reveal the inscribed base, which could then be used as a personal seal to sign documents or secure possessions. A single object thus served a triple purpose. It was a beautiful piece of jewelry, a potent amulet for protection, and a practical seal for establishing identity and security. This seamless integration of the aesthetic, the magical, and the utilitarian is a hallmark of ancient Egyptian craftsmanship. Necklaces and bracelets featuring multiple scarabs or a single, prominent scarab pendant were also incredibly popular. These pieces often incorporated a symphony of materials, each chosen for its specific symbolic resonance. A typical necklace might combine scarabs carved from red carnelian, symbolizing the blood of life and the power of the sun, with beads of vibrant blue faience representing the Nile and the heavens, and perhaps accents of golden electrum. Wearing such a piece was like draping oneself in a miniature cosmos, with the scarab acting as the central engine of solar power. There is strong evidence to suggest that certain types of scarab jewelry were also believed to have apotropaic qualities, that is, the power to ward off evil influences, the evil eye, and specific ailments. A scarab made of a dark, protective stone like hematite might be worn by a pregnant woman or a young child, groups considered particularly vulnerable to malign forces. The beetle's association with spontaneous creation and robust life made it a natural guardian for the beginnings of life from childbirth through early childhood. In this context, a scarab amulet was a mother's prayer made tangible, a plea to the gods to watch over her child and ensure they grew strong and healthy, just as the young beetle emerged vigorous from its dung ball cradle. What's truly fascinating is how the function of a scarab could be subtly altered by its inscription and its placement on the body. A scarab ring used as a seal was inherently linked to the owner's public identity and social dealings. In contrast, a small, uninscribed scarab strung on a cord and worn hidden under clothing, nestled against the skin, was a deeply private amulet. Its power was directed inward for the sole benefit of the wearer, a secret source of strength and protection known only to them. This demonstrates a sophisticated understanding of magical intention. The Egyptians recognized that the same symbolic form could be calibrated for different outcomes based on its context and use. Furthermore, the choice of which deity or symbol to carve on a scarab's base allowed for a personalized form of devotion. One person might choose a scarab inscribed with a figure of the goddess Hathor, seeking her blessings of love, music, and joy. Another might select one with the dwarf god Bes, whose grotesque but benevolent face was famed for protecting the home and family. The scarab form provided the universal solar power, while the inscription fine-tuned that power to the wearer's specific needs and hopes. This enduring practice meant that from the moment a person awoke and adorned themselves for the day, they were engaging in a ritual that connected them to the cosmic order. A scarab ring on a finger was a daily reminder of one's name and identity, and a tool for interacting with the world. A scarab pendant resting near the heart was a constant invocation of protection and health. For the ancient Egyptians, there was no sharp divide between the spiritual and the mundane. The divine was present in every aspect of life. By wearing the scarab, they carried a piece of the sun's journey with them, harnessing its energy for protection, imbuing their daily actions with sacred meaning, and ensuring that the promise of regeneration was not just a hope for the afterlife, but a tangible force in their present waking world. This intimate relationship with a symbol demonstrates a culture that sought to weave magic, faith, and beauty into the very fabric of existence. Now, let's bring all these powerful elements together to understand the complete picture of the scarab's role in the afterlife. Imagine the final moments of preparing a body for burial. The priests trained in the sacred rituals would not simply place a single amulet on the mummy and call it a day. Instead, they were assembling a sophisticated spiritual toolkit, a layered defense system designed to navigate the soul through every stage of its perilous journey. The scarab, in its various forms, was the cornerstone of this system, with each type of amulet serving a distinct and critical function. The journey to the afterlife was a multi-stage ordeal, and the ancient Egyptians, in their meticulous planning, designed specific scarabs to protect the soul at each crucial step. The first and most fundamental challenge was the journey through the Duat itself. This was not a simple stroll, but a treacherous voyage through a dark, labyrinthine underworld filled with demons, lakes of fire, and gates guarded by hostile beings. For this stage, the soul needed mobility and protection. This is where the magnificent winged scarab pectoral came into play. Placed prominently on the chest of the mummy over the wrappings, its outstretched wings were not just decorative. They were the soul's vehicle, They symbolize the transformation of the deceased into a mobile, bird-like spirit, the Ba, capable of flying over dangers, speeding through the dark corridors, and ascending towards the realm of the gods. The winged scarab was the engine for the journey, providing the power of flight to overcome the physical obstacles of the underworld. It was the assurance that the soul would not be earthbound or trapped, but could navigate this terrifying landscape with the speed of a falcon and the protective embrace of a vulture's wings. But reaching the end of the journey presented the ultimate test, the judgment in the Hall of Two Truths. Here, all the mobility in the world would be useless if the heart, the record of a lifetime, testified against its owner. This was the moment for the Heart Scarab to perform its vital role. This amulet, often carved from a dark green stone symbolizing new life, was placed directly over the physical heart, sometimes even replacing it. Its power was not in movement, but in silence and transformation. The spell inscribed on its base was a magical command, a plea to the heart not to bear witness. Its function was to act as a substitute, to transform a heart potentially heavy with sin into one as light and pure as the feather of Maat. While the winged scarab ensured the soul could reach the courtroom, the heart scarab ensured it would win the case. One amulet guided the body of the soul, while the other safeguarded its essence. The brilliance of this system lies in its beautiful, logical synergy. These amulets were not competing for power, they were collaborating. The winged scarab on the outside dealt with the external threats of the journey, while the heart scarab on the inside dealt with the internal threat of a guilty conscience. They worked in a sequence. First, the wings carried the soul to the Hall of Judgment. Then, the silent heart secured a favorable verdict, and the ultimate goal of this verdict was rebirth. This is where the core symbolism of the Scarab Beetle, the very reason it was chosen for this sacred duty, came full circle. After passing judgment, the justified soul was believed to be reborn into a new, eternal life in the field of reeds. The scarab, as the symbol of Khepri, was the promise of this rebirth. Just as the sun god was reborn each dawn and the beetle emerged anew from its ball of dung, the successful soul would be regenerated. The scarab amulets were therefore a physical guarantee of this cosmic principle. They were a divine battery charged with the power of perpetual renewal. This layered approach extends even further when we consider other scarab forms found in tombs. Smaller, less elaborate scarab amulets might be sewn into the mummy's wrappings at various points, providing general protection or reinforcing specific parts of the body. A scarab placed near the head might protect the senses and the mind, while one near the feet could ensure a firm footing in the afterlife. Commemorative scarabs, like those of Amenhotep III, placed in the tomb, served to remind the gods of the deceased's righteous deeds and royal associations in life, bolstering their social standing in death. Even the ubiquitous scarab seal rings buried with their owners could be interpreted as tools for the afterlife, perhaps used to seal one's own tomb from evil spirits or to authenticate the soul's identity before the gods. Every scarab, from the grandest pectoral to the smallest seal, contributed to a comprehensive strategy for immortality. For the ancient Egyptians, preparing for death was about leaving nothing to chance. By surrounding the body with these multifaceted symbols of the scarab, they were creating a fail-safe system. They ensured the soul had guidance for the journey, an advocate for the judgment, and a divine contract for the resurrection to come. It was their way of taking the most reliable cycle they could observe in nature, the daily rebirth of the sun, mirrored by the humble beetle, and weaving it into a promise of eternal life. And this intricate web of belief and symbolism is not merely theoretical. It is a story written in stone, gold, and clay, unearthed by archaeologists from the sands of Egypt. Some of the most telling discoveries come not from the tombs of pharaohs, but from the homes and workshops of the common people. Take, for instance, the village of Deir el-Medina, the community housing the skilled artisans who built and decorated the royal tombs in the Valley of the Kings. This was a town of highly respected, literate workers, and their settlement has provided an unparalleled window into daily life. Excavations there have yielded a staggering number of scarabs, thousands upon thousands of them. They are found in every conceivable context, in the foundations of houses, placed there as protective deposits during construction, buried in the floors of rooms as offerings for family safety and prosperity, and of course within the modest tombs of the workers themselves. The sheer volume of scarabs at Deir el-Medina speaks volumes. It tells us that the symbolic power of the beetle was not confined to the elite. It was a fundamental, indispensable part of the spiritual toolkit for every level of society. These were not mass-produced trinkets without meaning. For the worker who carved the eyes of a pharaoh onto a tomb wall, placing a scarab amulet over the heart of his own child was an act of profound faith. The variety is also telling. Alongside the standard heart scarabs, we find scarabs carved with the names of specific kings, perhaps indicating loyalty or seeking royal protection. Others bear the images of protective deities like Bes or Taweret, clearly intended for use in life rather than death, aimed at safeguarding households and ensuring healthy childbirth. The Deir el-Medina finds reveal a living, breathing tradition where the scarab was woven into the fabric of everyday existence, a constant source of comfort and protection for those who lived in the shadow of the great monuments they built. On the opposite end of the social spectrum, the tomb of the boy King Tutankhamun offers a breathtaking glimpse into how the pharaonic elite leveraged the scarab's power on a truly divine scale. While Howard Carter's famous exclamation of seeing wonderful things referred to the general splendor, the scarabs within were among the most wonderful. They were not simple amulets, they were masterpieces of cosmological art. The most spectacular is undoubtedly the great pectoral featuring a winged scarab carved from a single, large piece of a rare, translucent yellow-green stone known as Libyan desert glass. This material itself is extraordinary, formed by a meteorite impact millions of years ago, which immediately connected the scarab to celestial, otherworldly power. The beetle is shown pushing a solar bark, a direct and magnificent depiction of its role as Khepri, the sun god. It is set within an elaborate frame of gold, inlaid with lapis lazuli, carnelian, and turquoise, creating a miniature model of the universe intended to propel the king's soul through the afterlife. But Tutankhamun's tomb contained more than this one iconic piece. Dozens of other scarabs were found, each with a specific purpose. There were heart scarabs of polished green jasper, one of which was still lodged within the mummy's wrappings. There were scarab rings and even a beautiful scarab bracelet inscribed with the king's throne name, Nebkheperir. This collection was a comprehensive spiritual arsenal. It demonstrates that for the pharaoh, the scarab's symbolism was magnified to match his status as a living god. His rebirth was not just a personal hope, it was a national imperative essential for the continued order of the cosmos. The quality and quantity of scarabs in his tomb show that no expense was spared in ensuring this cosmic rebirth was successful, utilizing the finest materials and the most skilled artisans to create objects of unparalleled magical and artistic potency. These archaeological finds also open a fascinating window into the vast trade networks that fueled ancient Egyptian civilization. The materials used for scarabs tell a story that stretches far beyond the Nile Valley. The vibrant blue lapis lazuli so prized for inlaying royal scarabs like Tutankhamun's had a single, distant source, the mountains of modern-day Afghanistan. To get this stone to Egypt required an incredibly long and perilous journey, likely passing through Mesopotamia and the Levant, making it an incredibly expensive luxury item. Similarly, the deep red carnelian favored for its solar connections was often sourced from the eastern desert or even from Nubia to the south. The presence of these materials in scarabs, from the simplest beaded necklace to the most elaborate pectoral, is concrete evidence of Egypt's economic reach. A scarab of glazed steatite found in a commoner's tomb might be locally produced, but a noble scarab seal made of lapis lazuli is a testament to international trade and diplomacy. It shows that the desire to harness the scarab's power was a driving force in commerce, creating demand for exotic materials that connected Egypt to the wider ancient world. The distribution of scarabs themselves also acts as a marker of Egyptian influence. Archaeologists have found Egyptian-style scarabs at sites across the Levant and the Mediterranean, sometimes in the ruins of local palaces. These were likely diplomatic gifts, tokens of trade agreements, or even symbols of political allegiance to the pharaoh. A local Canaanite ruler wearing an Egyptian scarab ring was doing more than appreciating fine jewelry. He was publicly aligning himself with the power and prestige of the Egyptian court. Thus, a small carved beetle becomes a piece of historical data, tracing the flow of goods, ideas, and power across continents and centuries. Ultimately, what these discoveries underscore is the incredible versatility and enduring power of this single symbol. From the dusty floors of a worker's house at Deir el-Medina to the golden shrines of Tutankhamun, the scarab served a universal human need for protection, meaning, and hope for life beyond death. The archaeological record proves that its significance was not static. It evolved and adapted, functioning as a personal amulet, a royal insignia, a magical tool for the afterlife, and a commodity in a globalized ancient economy. The humble dung beetle, through the keen observation and profound spirituality of the ancient Egyptians, was transformed into one of the most enduring icons in human history. Each scarab unearthed by an archaeologist's trowel is not just an artifact, it is a frozen moment of belief, a direct connection to the hopes and fears of the person who last held it thousands of years ago, placing their faith in the power of a beetle that rolled the sun across the sky. Our journey now takes us to a pivotal era in Egyptian history, a time of rebirth not just for the nation but for the scarab itself, the Middle Kingdom. Following the chaos and fragmentation of the First Intermediate Period, Egypt was reunified under strong pharaohs from Thebes, inaugurating a cultural renaissance that would redefine the relationship between the people and their gods. It is during this dynamic period that we witness the scarab beetle truly come into its own, evolving from a relatively simple administrative tool into one of the most pervasive and powerful symbols in the Egyptian world. To understand this transformation, we have to look at the profound shifts happening within society. The collapse of the Old Kingdom's highly centralized, god-king-focused state had a democratizing effect on religion. While the pharaoh was still the primary intermediary with the gods, there was a growing sense of personal piety, a belief that ordinary individuals could and should cultivate a direct relationship with the divine. This search for personal protection and a guaranteed afterlife created a fertile ground for the scarab's symbolism to flourish in entirely new ways. Prior to the Middle Kingdom, seal amulets were certainly used, but they often took different forms, such as animals or geometric shapes. The scarab existed, but it was not yet the dominant force it would become. What changed was a perfect alignment of practical need and spiritual yearning. The Middle Kingdom bureaucracy was extensive, and the use of seals to mark ownership and authenticate documents was essential for trade and administration. The scarab's form was perfectly suited for this. Its flat base was an ideal surface for inscriptions, and its oval, domed shape was comfortable to hold and roll. As these scarab seals became commonplace in the daily life of officials and merchants, their very familiarity bred a deeper significance. An object used every day to secure one's property and identity naturally began to be seen as a source of personal protection. The beetle shape, already connected to the sun god through earlier theological developments, started to absorb this personal, protective power. It was a natural progression from sealing a jar of grain to sealing one's own fate against misfortune. This era also saw a dramatic expansion in the scope of funerary beliefs. The promise of an afterlife, once largely reserved for the king and the highest elite, was now eagerly sought by a much broader segment of society, including provincial governors, soldiers, and skilled artisans. This democratization of the afterlife created an enormous demand for objects that could magically assist the soul on its journey. The scarab, with its potent associations with spontaneous generation, the sun cycle, and rebirth, was the perfect candidate. Middle Kingdom tombs, even those of modest means, began to include scarabs not just as seals but as dedicated funerary amulets. This is the period when we see the early precursors to the Heart Scarab begin to appear. These amulets were often inscribed not with a name and title for sealing purposes, but with simple, protective symbols or brief appeals to deities, clearly intended for spiritual rather than administrative use. They were a form of insurance for the soul, a tangible piece of magic that an individual could take to the grave. The inscriptions on these Middle Kingdom scarabs provide a fascinating window into the minds of the people who commissioned them. Alongside the names of pharaohs like Amenemhat or Senusret, which were popular to show loyalty and invoke royal protection, we start to find the names of private individuals. A man might have a scarab made bearing his own name and the title Overseer of the Granary, ensuring that his identity and social status would be recognized in the next world. Even more telling are the inscriptions that feature short, hopeful phrases or the names of gods associated with household safety, such as the dwarf god Bes. This practice shows that scarabs were being used by the living as personal talismans for health and protection, their power extending from this life into the next. The sheer volume of scarabs produced during the Middle Kingdom is staggering. Workshops, particularly in the northern capital of Ich-Toi and in Thebes, mass-produced them in glazed steatite, making them accessible to nearly everyone. This widespread availability cemented the scarab's role as a universal symbol of regeneration, a symbol that transcended social class. Perhaps the most significant development was the theological refinement of the scarab's connection to the sun god. While the concept of Khepri existed earlier, it was during the Middle Kingdom that this aspect of the sun god became fully integrated into the core solar theology. Religious texts from this period, such as the coffin texts which were written on the inside of middle-class coffins, elaborate on the role of Khepri as the self-created dawn sun. This formalized the link that everyday Egyptians saw in nature. The beetle rolling its ball was the god pushing the sun. This theological endorsement from the state religion gave immense weight to the personal use of the scarab. It was no longer just a folk symbol, it was now a direct, sanctioned link to a fundamental creative force in the universe. Wearing or being buried with a scarab was an act of cosmic alignment, an attempt to harness the very power that renewed the world each morning. The rise of the scarab in the Middle Kingdom is therefore a story of convergence. It was the meeting point of bureaucratic necessity, the growth of personal piety, the democratization of the afterlife, and the formalization of solar theology. This humble beetle, through this unique set of historical circumstances, was elevated from a functional seal to a sacred key, unlocking the hopes of an entire civilization for protection in life and rebirth in death. This era of the scarab's flourishing, however, was interrupted by one of the most tumultuous periods in Egyptian history, a time that would test the nation's identity and, in a surprising way, reshape the scarab's own story. Around the year 1650 before the Common Era, a wave of people from the Levant, known to us as the Hyksos, meaning rulers of foreign lands, settled in the Nile Delta and eventually established their own ruling dynasty. For over a century, they controlled northern Egypt from their capital at Avaris, while a native Egyptian dynasty held onto power in Thebes to the south. This era, the Second Intermediate Period, was traditionally viewed by the Egyptians as a time of humiliation and foreign oppression. Yet, from an archaeological perspective, it becomes a fascinating laboratory of cultural interaction, and the scarab provides some of the most telling evidence. During Hyksos' rule, scarab production did not stop. It transformed dramatically. What archaeologists have labeled Hyksos scarabs are often strikingly different from their Middle Kingdom predecessors. They are frequently made from less refined materials like pale, crudely glazed steatite or simple faience. Their carving is less precise with the beetle's details. The clypeus, the legs, the division of the wing cases rendered in a simplified, almost schematic style. Most notably, a vast number of these scarabs are anpagraphic, meaning they lack any inscription on their bases. To an Egyptologist accustomed to the refined artistry of the Middle Kingdom, these scarabs could easily be dismissed as a sign of cultural decline, a loss of traditional craftsmanship under foreign, less sophisticated rulers. But this interpretation is being increasingly challenged by a more nuanced view. Rather than seeing these scarabs as inferior copies, many scholars now argue they represent a fascinating process of cultural adaptation. The Hyksos were not barbarians, they were savvy traders and administrators who deeply admired Egyptian culture. They adopted Egyptian gods, Egyptian artistic motifs, and crucially, the Egyptian practice of using scarab seals. However, they may have adapted the symbol to fit their own technological capabilities and perhaps their own symbolic needs. The shift to anpagraphic bases might not indicate a loss of literacy, but a different functional priority. If the primary purpose of the scarab for the Hyksos was its amuletic power as a symbol of protection and rebirth, the specific inscription of an Egyptian name or title may have held less importance than the potent shape of the beetle itself. The scarab's form was the source of its magic. The inscription was an added, but not always essential, layer. This perspective reframes the Hyksos scarab not as a poor imitation, but as a distinct artifact type with its own logic and value. Furthermore, the distribution of these scarabs tells a story that goes far beyond simple conquest. Hyksos-style scarabs have been found not only in Egypt but also at sites throughout the Levant, the Hyksos homeland. This suggests that these objects became a key element in the vibrant trade networks that the Hyksos dynasty controlled. A Hyksos merchant in Canaan might use a scarab seal not just because it was functionally effective, but because it carried the prestige and administrative authority associated with the powerful Egyptian state. In this sense, the scarab became a symbol of international commerce and diplomacy, its form simplified for mass production to meet the demands of a growing trans-regional market. The crudeness of their manufacture could be a sign of efficiency, not incompetence. They were produced in such vast quantities that they became one of the most common Egyptian-style artifacts found across the Near East during this period, spreading the iconography of the scarab beetle farther than ever before. The debate among Egyptologists is far from settled. Some point to the existence of finely made scarabs from this period, often bearing the names of Hyksos rulers, as evidence that high-quality craftsmanship was still possible for the elite. This suggests that the simpler, anpagraphic scarabs were indeed made for a broader, perhaps less wealthy population. The key takeaway is that the Hyksos period forced the scarab to evolve. It was no longer solely an Egyptian symbol with a rigid set of artistic and religious rules. It became a flexible icon, adapted by a foreign culture that saw its inherent power and practical utility. When the native Egyptian princes of Thebes finally rallied and expelled the Hyksos, reuniting Egypt and launching the new kingdom, they did so with a renewed sense of national pride and a desire to reassert traditional Egyptian values. This included a return to the high artistic standards of the past, yet the episode of the Hyksos scarab had a lasting impact. It demonstrated the symbol's incredible resilience and its ability to transcend political and cultural boundaries. The humble beetle had survived a foreign occupation and in doing so had proven that its appeal was universal, a power that could be recognized and reinvented by cultures far from the banks of the Nile. But the power of the scarab wasn't just in its overall shape. It was embedded in the meticulous details of its anatomy, with each part of the beetle's body carefully carved to hold a specific, profound meaning. The ancient Egyptian artisans were not simply creating a realistic insect. they were crafting a multi-layered symbolic map of the universe. Let's start with the head. The scarab's head is typically shown with a distinctive plate-like structure called the clypeus, and often with segmented antennae. In the practical world of the living insect, this is its primary sensory apparatus, used for navigating and interacting with its environment. Symbolically, this translated to perception, awareness, and the faculty of judgment. By giving the amulet a clearly defined head, the Egyptians were imbuing it with a kind of consciousness. It was not a blind, passive force, it was an aware guardian. This was particularly crucial for its role in the afterlife. A scarab placed on a mummy needed to see the path through the underworld, to perceive the dangers and navigate around them. It needed the awareness to function effectively during the weighing of the heart, to understand the proceedings and activate its magical spells. The head symbolized the amulet's active intelligence, its ability to guide and protect with purpose and clarity. Now look closely at the underside, and you'll find one of the most intricate features: the 6 legs, each meticulously carved with fine, serrated edges to represent the tiny hairs on a real beetle's limbs. These are not merely decorative. For the dung beetle, these strong, gripping legs are its engine. They provide the traction and power needed to push a ball many times its own weight across rough, uneven terrain. In the symbolic language of the amulet, these legs represent movement, progress, and unwavering stability. They are the physical manifestation of the relentless forward momentum that was so central to the scarab's meaning. Each serration, each carefully defined segment, speaks to the immense effort required for the soul's journey. The path to the afterlife was not easy. It was an arduous climb, a constant struggle against chaos. The scarab's legs guaranteed that the soul would not slip backward, that it would have the traction to keep moving forward, just as the sun is pushed across the sky. They provided the stability to stand firm during the final judgment, to not be shaken by the terrifying presence of the gods or the weight of one's own past. The legs ensured that the transformative power of the scarab was not a static wish, but a dynamic force capable of propelling the soul toward its goal. The most prominent feature, however, is the large, rounded, and beautifully segmented back known as the elytra. This is the hardened wing case that protects the delicate flight wings underneath. On a scarab amulet, this dome is often the most elaborately decorated part, sometimes polished to a high sheen or incised with patterns. This rounded back held a dual symbolism of profound importance. First, it was seen as a representation of the vault of heaven itself. The smooth, curved carapace mirrored the arc of the sky that stretched over the world, the very domain through which the sun god Ra made his daily journey. Wearing or carrying a scarab was therefore like holding a tiny piece of the celestial sphere, a direct connection to the cosmos. But secondly, and perhaps more fundamentally, the rounded form represented the concept of completion, wholeness, and the eternal cycle. It is a sphere, a shape with no beginning and no end. This perfectly embodied the endless cycle of the sun rising, setting, and rising again, and the promised cycle of life, death, and rebirth. The segmentation on the back, the lines dividing the wing cases, often reinforced this idea. Sometimes there were 3 lines which could be interpreted as representing the 3 main aspects of the sun god: Khepri, the morning sun; Ra, the midday sun; and Autumn, the evening sun. Other times, the segments might symbolize the different stages of existence or the phases of the cosmic cycle. The rounded back was the ultimate symbol of protection and perfection. It shielded the potential for flight and rebirth, just as it protected the beetle's actual wings, and its flawless, continuous shape promised a successful, unbroken journey to eternity. Every curve and line on a scarab amulet was a word in a silent, sacred language, speaking of perception, progress, and the perfect protective circle of the heavens. And in that simple, determined act of rolling its ball, the Egyptians saw something even grander than the journey of the sun. They perceived the very act of creation. The dung ball itself was not merely a source of food or a nursery. To the Egyptian mind, it was a microcosm, a miniature model of the entire world in its raw, unformed state. Just as the primordial god Atum emerged from the watery chaos of Nun to bring order to the cosmos, the Scarab Beetle emerged from the inert, chaotic matter of the dung ball. The beetle's labor of shaping that formless mass into a perfect sphere was a divine parallel. It was an ongoing demonstration of how order or mat could be imposed upon chaos. The ball represented the potential for life, a world in waiting, and the beetle was the creative force that nurtured that potential into being. This wasn't a one-time event from a distant myth. It was a miracle happening daily in the fields, a constant reminder that creation was a continuous process sustained by divine effort. This symbolic connection elevates the beetle's action from simple instinct to a sacred duty. The Egyptian priests and thinkers saw the beetle's journey as a model for the sun god's own nightly voyage. Just as the beetle rolled its ball across the land, the god Ra, in his solar bark, was pushed through the dark, dangerous waters of the underworld by his crew of lesser deities. The path was fraught with obstacles, most famously the giant serpent Apophis, who sought to stop the sun's progress and plunge the world back into eternal night. The Scarab Beetle, pushing its ball against the resistance of the sand and pebbles, mirrored this cosmic struggle. Its relentless, backward-moving progress was an earthly echo of the sun god's battle against chaos. Every time the beetle successfully buried its ball, it was a symbolic victory for order, ensuring that the cycle of life would continue. The ball's burial was the sun's setting, and the emergence of the new beetle was its glorious rebirth at dawn. In this elegant metaphor, the entire cosmos was reflected in the life cycle of a single, industrious insect. The spherical shape of the dung ball was itself deeply significant. A sphere is a symbol of wholeness, completion, and cyclicality. It has no beginning and no end. For the Egyptians, this perfectly represented the eternal nature of the solar cycle and the universe itself. The world was not a flat, linear plane with a definitive start and finish. It was a continuous loop of renewal. The scarab, by crafting and moving this perfect sphere, was quite literally rolling the world into existence each day. This idea connects the scarab to the creator god Ptah, another deity associated with crafting and shaping the world from raw material. The beetle became a kind of master artisan, sculpting the very fabric of reality with its legs. This adds a profound layer to the scarab's role in the afterlife. When a person was buried with a scarab amulet, they weren't just invoking the power of the sun, they were aligning themselves with the fundamental creative force of the universe. They were hoping to be recreated, to be shaped anew, just as the world is renewed each morning. The dung ball, therefore, was far from being a symbol of filth or decay. In the sophisticated symbolic language of ancient Egypt, it was the raw material of existence, the egg of the world, and the scarab beetle was the divine craftsman whose tireless work ensured that the cosmos would never fall back into the silent waters of Nun. This biological journey of the scarab, from a hidden egg to a fully formed adult, offered the ancient Egyptians a perfect, observable model for their most profound spiritual belief, the transformation of the human soul after death. They did not see the beetle's life cycle as we understand it scientifically today. Instead, they witnessed what appeared to be a true miracle of spontaneous generation. An adult beetle would carefully bury a ball of dung, and sometime later, a new, independent beetle would emerge from that very same ball with no visible intermediate stages. To them, this was not a gradual process of metamorphosis, but a direct and powerful rebirth. The inert, lifeless dung ball became a cocoon of potential, a tomb from which life emerged victorious. This mirrored their core hope for the afterlife, that the physical body, entombed and seemingly inert, could give birth to a vibrant spiritual existence. The scarab did not just symbolize renewal, it demonstrated a complete and utter transformation of substance, turning decay into life and darkness into light. This concept of metamorphosis was central to the Egyptian understanding of the soul's journey. They believed that death was not an end, but a transition into a different state of being, much like the caterpillar's transformation into a butterfly in other cultural metaphors. For the Egyptians, the scarab was their butterfly. The journey through the Jewat, the underworld, was itself a transformative process, a series of trials and gates that refined and changed the soul, preparing it for eternity. The emergence of the adult beetle from the dung ball was the ultimate symbol of this successful passage. It represented the soul's final emergence from the darkness of the tomb into the radiant light of the field of reeds, the Egyptian paradise. This was not merely a relocation of the spirit, but a fundamental change in its very nature. The deceased was transformed into an Ak, a glorified, effective spirit that could live among the gods. The scarab amulet placed on the mummy was therefore a catalyst for this change. It was a magical object charged with the specific power of metamorphosis, intended to ensure that the individual would not remain a lifeless corpse, but would undergo the same miraculous transformation as the beetle. The connection goes even deeper when we consider the different stages of the scarab's development, which the Egyptians, despite not knowing the scientific details, intuitively understood as a process with a beginning, a hidden period of growth, and a dramatic conclusion. The egg stage represented the soul's potential, the seed of life placed within the safety of the mummified body, just as the egg was hidden within the dung ball. The larval stage, though unseen, symbolized the soul's hidden struggles and development within the underworld. This was a critical period of gestation and testing, where the soul's worth was determined and its new form was shaped. Finally, the pupal stage and the emergence of the adult beetle represented the culmination of the journey, the soul's rebirth as a perfected, eternal being. The beautiful, hardened wings of the adult scarab, so different from the soft larva, mirrored the soul's acquisition of its new, spiritual body, capable of flight and freedom. In this way, the entire hidden biological process served as a powerful metaphor for the soul's own hidden journey, giving the Egyptians a tangible symbol for a transformation that was, by its very nature, invisible and mysterious. This symbolism made the scarab an incredibly potent and comforting image. It provided a clear, natural guarantee that death was not a final state. Just as they could be certain that a new beetle would emerge from the buried ball, they could trust that their soul would emerge from the tomb. The scarab's transformation was a law of nature, and by aligning themselves with it through amulets and spells, they sought to make their own resurrection an inevitable, natural law. It turned the terrifying unknown of death into a predictable cycle, as reliable as the sunrise that the scarab also represented. The humble dung beetle, through its remarkable life cycle, became the ultimate emblem of hope, proving that from the most unlikely and humble beginnings, even from what seems like waste and decay, a glorious new existence could be born. The story of the scarab, however, does not end at the borders of Egypt. This powerful symbol was too compelling to remain confined to the Nile Valley, and it began a remarkable journey across the ancient world, carried on the currents of trade, diplomacy, and conquest. As it traveled, the scarab was embraced by neighboring cultures, but its meaning often shifted, reflecting the unique beliefs and needs of its new adopters. One of the earliest and most significant areas of influence was to the south, in the Kingdom of Kush, in what is now modern-day Sudan. The Nubians had a long and complex relationship with Egypt, alternating between being trading partners, mercenaries, conquered subjects, and even rulers of Egypt during the 25th dynasty. Throughout this history, they were deeply influenced by Egyptian culture, and the scarab was a symbol they eagerly adopted. For the Nubian kings, especially during the period when they ruled Egypt as pharaohs, using Egyptian-style scarabs was a powerful political statement. It was a way of legitimizing their rule, demonstrating their mastery of Egyptian religion and administration to both their new Egyptian subjects and their Nubian base. Tombs of Kushite royalty, like those at the necropolis of El Kuru, are filled with beautiful scarabs and scarab-shaped seals that are virtually indistinguishable from those made in Egypt itself. However, the Nubians were not simply copying, they were integrating the symbol into their own existing belief systems. In Nubian religion, there was a strong emphasis on lion deities and warriors. Some scholars suggest that the scarab's solar symbolism may have fused with local sun cults, and its promise of rebirth would have resonated deeply in a culture with its own rich traditions of the afterlife. A scarab found in a Nubian tomb, therefore, while Egyptian in form, might have been understood through a slightly different spiritual lens, its power channeled to protect a soul on a journey guided by both Egyptian and Nubian gods. To the northeast, in the bustling city-states of the Levant Canaan, Phoenicia, and later Judah and Israel, the scarab took on a life of its own, becoming a truly international symbol. From the Middle Bronze Age onward, Egyptian scarabs flowed into the Levant in enormous quantities, both through formal gift exchange between royal courts and through thriving commercial networks. In the palaces of Canaanite kings, owning and using Egyptian scarabs was a mark of high status and sophistication. A local ruler sealing a document with a scarab bearing the name of an Egyptian pharaoh was aligning himself with the prestige and authority of the most powerful civilization in the region. But as we saw with the Hyksos, the Levantines often adapted the symbol to their own purposes. While imported Egyptian scarabs were highly valued, local workshops began producing their own versions. These Levantine scarabs can often be identified by their distinct style, sometimes with a more elongated body or less detailed anatomy, and most importantly by their inscriptions. Instead of the names of Egyptian pharaohs or spells from the Book of the Dead, these scarabs might be inscribed with the names of local Canaanite deities like El, Baal, or Anat, or with the names and titles of local rulers. This represents a fascinating process of cultural translation. The scarab retained its core functions as a seal and an amulet of protection, but its divine associations were swapped out. The power of the Egyptian sun god was replaced by the power of the Canaanite storm god. The scarab became a vessel for local faith, demonstrating its incredible versatility as a symbol that could be separated from its original theological context and repurposed for new beliefs. This adaptability ensured the scarab's survival long after Egypt's political power in the region had waned. When the Greeks began to interact more frequently with Egypt in the first millennium before the Common Era, they encountered the scarab and were immediately fascinated. To the Greeks, however, the idea of a dung beetle as a sacred symbol was perplexing, even comical. The Greek historian Herodotus, who visited Egypt in the 5th century, noted the Egyptians' reverence for the beetle with a mixture of curiosity and bemusement. The Greek mind, which tended to anthropomorphize its gods into human forms, struggled with the Egyptian tendency to venerate animals. As a result, when the Greeks adopted the scarab, it was largely stripped of its deep solar and resurrection symbolism. Instead, it found a new and lasting purpose in a very practical domain, as a seal and most famously as the central element in finger rings. The Greeks perfected the swivel ring design, creating elegant gold and silver rings where a scarab, often exquisitely carved from a colorful hardstone like chalcedony or carnelian, was mounted on a wire. The scarab's flat base remained the ideal surface for intricate engravings, but now these engravings reflected Greek tastes and mythology. Instead of hieroglyphs, one might find images of Apollo, Athena, or heroic scenes from the Trojan War. For a Greek gentleman, a scarab ring was a stylish piece of jewelry, a functional personal seal, and a token of good luck, but it no longer held the key to eternal life. It was a secularization of a sacred object, a transition from a powerful religious talisman to a sophisticated personal accessory. The Romans, who absorbed so much from both the Greeks and the Egyptians, continued this trend. The scarab remained a popular motif in Roman jewelry, particularly in the form of rings and intaglios used for sealing. The Roman fascination with Egyptian culture, known as Egyptioca, meant that Egyptian-style objects, including scarabs, were often seen as exotic and fashionable. However, the Roman understanding of the symbol was even further removed from its original meaning. For a Roman citizen, a scarab might symbolize good fortune or protection, much like any other lucky charm, but its connection to the sun god Khepri or the weighing of the heart was likely lost. In a way, the scarab's journey through the classical world mirrors the journey of many ancient symbols, from a specific, deeply held religious belief to a more generalized cultural motif. Yet, its enduring popularity, even in this diluted form, is a testament to the power of its basic shape and the allure of its Egyptian origins. It remained a recognizable icon of an ancient and mysterious wisdom, a piece of exotic magic that could be worn on the hand. From the tombs of Nubian kings to the palaces of Canaanite rulers and the villas of Greek and Roman aristocrats, the scarab demonstrated an incredible ability to cross cultural boundaries. It was a shape that conveyed authority, offered protection, and spoke of a connection to the distant and revered civilization of the Nile, proving that a powerful idea carved in stone can travel much farther than anyone could have ever imagined. The scarab's journey, however, did not conclude with the fall of the pharaohs or its adoption by classical civilizations. It lay dormant for centuries, a symbol waiting in the wings of history for a moment that would catapult it back into the global spotlight with unprecedented force. That moment arrived on a hot November day in 1922, when archaeologist Howard Carter, peering through a small hole by candlelight, uttered his famous words to his financier, Lord Carnarvon. The discovery of the nearly intact tomb of Tutankhamun was not just an archaeological milestone, it was a cultural earthquake that sent shockwaves across the world. And at the epicenter of this Tutmania was the scarab, immortalized in the breathtaking artifacts that captured the public's imagination. Photographs of the young king's golden coffin, and most notably the magnificent winged scarab pectoral resting on his mummy's chest, were splashed across newspapers and magazines. Suddenly, the ancient beetle was not just a museum curiosity, it was a symbol of unimaginable wealth, exotic mystery, and timeless beauty. This global fascination perfectly aligned with the burgeoning design movement of the era, Art Deco. Art Deco was defined by its love for geometric shapes, bold colors, luxury materials, and a fascination with the exotic. The treasures of Tutankhamun's tomb provided a brand new, incredibly glamorous vocabulary for designers. The scarab, with its elegant oval form, its intrinsic connection to precious gold and lapis lazuli, and its aura of ancient power became an instant motif. Jewelry houses in Paris and New York began creating pieces that directly referenced the Egyptian style. You would see brooches and pendants featuring scarabs carved from onyx or dark green chalcedony, their backs intricately patterned with inlaid diamonds or brightly colored enamel mounted in gleaming platinum. The beetle's form was streamlined, stylized, and abstracted to fit the modern aesthetic, but its symbolic power remained intact. To wear a scarab brooch in the 1920s was to wear a piece of the world's biggest news story. It was a declaration of sophistication, a connection to a romanticized, ancient past, and an embrace of the modern machine age's love for sleek, powerful forms. This was not a revival of the scarab's religious meaning, but a celebration of its aesthetic and its mystique. It became a symbol of the Jazz Age, itself glamorous, mysterious, and defiantly modern, yet drawing its power from an ancient source. As the 20th century progressed, the scarab seamlessly transitioned from high fashion into the expanding realms of popular culture, particularly cinema. Hollywood, always eager for a compelling visual shorthand, recognized the scarab as the perfect emblem for ancient curses, hidden knowledge, and supernatural power. In the classic horror films of the 1930s and 40s, like The Mummy, a scarab amulet was often the key to unlocking a tomb or the source of a pharaoh's vengeful curse. The sight of a glowing scarab beetle scuttling towards a victim became a staple of the genre, cementing the insect's association with dread and the supernatural in the public mind. This cinematic portrayal, while sensationalized, tapped into a deep-seated cultural memory of the scarab's role in the afterlife, twisting its protective power into a malevolent force. This darker interpretation opened the door for the scarab to become a versatile character in its own right, no longer just a prop but an active agent in stories of adventure and fantasy. This evolution is brilliantly illustrated in the genre of pulp magazines and mid-century adventure serials. Here, the scarab was frequently the central MacGuffin, a coveted artifact that drove the entire plot. A typical story might involve an intrepid archaeologist racing against nefarious villains to find a fabled scarab of power that could control the elements or unlock an ancient weapon. The beetle's form was perfect for this. It was small enough to be hidden, portable, and easily concealed, yet potent enough to justify an entire global quest. This narrative tradition directly influenced later blockbusters like the Indiana Jones films, where the quest for a single, powerful artifact is the central theme. The scarab's journey from a sacred funerary object to a plot device in a Hollywood adventure is a testament to its enduring grip on our imagination as an object of desire and danger. In the late 20th and early 21st centuries, the scarab found a new and fertile ground in the world of video games and contemporary fantasy literature. Game designers and authors, building on decades of pop culture imagery, have further expanded the scarab's symbolic roles. In games like Age of Mythology or the Tomb Raider series, scarabs might function as collectible power-ups that enhance a character's abilities, directly referencing the ancient belief in the beetle's life-giving energy. In more narrative-driven role-playing games, such as World of Warcraft, scarabs often appear as enemies or guardians of ancient Egyptian-themed ruins, their hard carapaces and swarming behavior translating their earthly resilience into a formidable game mechanic. Here, the scarab is not just a symbol, it is an interactive entity, a challenge for the player to overcome, blending its historical aura with the needs of interactive storytelling. Modern fantasy literature has taken this reinterpretation even further. Authors like Rick Riordan, in his The Kane Chronicles series, reimagined the entire Egyptian pantheon for a young adult audience. In these stories, the scarab and the god Khepri are not relegated to dusty relics but are active, dynamic forces. Riordan portrays Khepri as a god who can literally roll the sun across the sky, and scarabs might be magical creatures that can be summoned for protection or attack. This approach transforms the ancient symbolism into a living, breathing part of a magical world, making the concepts of Egyptian mythology accessible and exciting to a new generation. The scarab's core attributes, creation, protection, and transformation, are preserved, but they are expressed through the language of modern fantasy, ensuring the symbol's relevance continues to evolve. What is truly fascinating about the scarab's modern journey is its chameleon-like ability to adapt while retaining its essential mystery. Whether it is gleaming on an Art Deco brooch, scuttling as a monster in a horror film, or glowing as a power-up in a video game, the scarab never completely loses its ancient DNA. It almost always carries a connotation of something old, powerful, and slightly mysterious. We may have stripped away the specific theological beliefs of the ancient Egyptians, but we have kept their sense of awe. The scarab endures because it is a perfect symbolic package. It is visually distinctive, rich with history, and flexible enough to represent everything from elegance and rebirth to danger and hidden power. It serves as a timeless bridge, connecting our modern world of technology and entertainment to the primal, human questions about life, death, and the cosmos that the ancient Egyptians so eloquently projected onto the humble dung beetle. Given its intimate connection with dung, a modern viewer might easily assume the ancient Egyptians viewed the scarab beetle with disdain, as a simple pest to be avoided. This, however, is one of the most persistent and misleading misconceptions about this sacred symbol. The reality is that the Egyptians made a clear and crucial distinction that our modern sensibilities often overlook. They separated the insect's behavior from the substance it interacted with. They saw the dung not as a symbol of filth, but as the raw, fertile material of life itself. In the scorching Egyptian sun, animal waste dried quickly and was not associated with the same notions of disease and contamination that we might have today. Instead, it was recognized as a powerful fertilizer, a substance that returned nutrients to the earth, enabling crops to grow. The dung ball, therefore, was not a symbol of decay but a cradle of potential. The beetle's mastery over this substance was seen as a divine act of transformation, turning the essence of life back into new life. To view the scarab as a pest is to completely miss the profound ecological and spiritual insight the Egyptians possessed. They revered the beetle not in spite of its actions, but precisely because of them, seeing in its work a sacred cycle of death and rebirth happening right before their eyes. Another common modern myth portrays the scarab's symbolism as being predominantly morbid, concerned only with death and the gloom of the tomb. While it is true that scarab amulets were essential for the afterlife, this focus was merely one application of a much broader, life-affirming power. The ancient Egyptian world, you did not draw a sharp line between life and death. They were two parts of a continuous, eternal cycle. The scarab's primary meaning was always rooted in the most vibrant force imaginable, the sun. Every morning, the rising sun was proof of the beetle's victory over darkness and chaos. This daily miracle was about the renewal of the world, the return of light and warmth that allowed all life to flourish. The scarab amulets worn by the living, the beautiful rings, necklaces, and bracelets were not reminders of mortality, but talismans of solar energy, health, and protection in the here and now. They were worn to channel the life-giving power of the sun god into the wearer's daily existence. The funerary use of the scarab was simply an extension of this same principle, ensuring that the cycle of renewal would continue for the individual soul just as it did for the cosmos. To see the scarab as solely a symbol of death is to ignore its role in the beginning of all things, its connection to creation, and its daily promise of a new day. Some popular media and simplified accounts have also perpetuated the idea that the scarab was a fearsome or malevolent creature, often depicted in horror films as a bringer of curses or a swarming agent of destruction. This interpretation is a complete inversion of the ancient understanding. In the Egyptian pantheon, the scarab god Khepri was a benevolent and necessary force. Without his daily effort to push the sun into the sky, the world would descend into perpetual night and chaos. The scarab was a fundamentally positive symbol of order triumphing over disorder, of life conquering death. It was a protector, not a predator. The spells on heart scarabs were pleas for mercy and silence, not incantations for vengeance. The modern, sinister portrayal says more about our own cultural fascination with the curse of the mummy trope than it does about the ancient Egyptian belief system. For them, the scarab was a source of comfort and hope, a guaranteed promise that the natural order was on their side. Its image was meant to soothe fears about the afterlife, not to inspire them. Furthermore, there is a tendency to oversimplify the scarab as having a single, static meaning throughout Egypt's 3,000-year history. The reality is that its symbolism evolved and expanded over time. In the Old Kingdom, its presence was less prominent. It was during the Middle Kingdom, with the growth of personal piety and the democratization of the afterlife, that the scarab truly exploded in popularity as a personal amulet. Later, in the New Kingdom, its role became even more complex, appearing as a political tool in the form of royal commemorative scarabs. To claim the scarab had one fixed meaning is to ignore its dynamic journey through Egyptian culture. It was a flexible symbol that could represent a pharaoh's hunting prowess, a merchant's personal signature, a mother's prayer for her child, and a soul's hope for eternity. Its meaning was shaped by its context, its inscription, and the needs of the person who used it. Appreciating the scarab fully requires us to let go of these modern simplifications and embrace the nuanced, positive, and multifaceted role it played in one of history's most remarkable civilizations. So, with all this rich symbolism surrounding the scarab, a fascinating question arises. How much did the ancient Egyptians truly understand about the insect's actual biology? It's a remarkable fact that modern entomology, the scientific study of insects, doesn't debunk their ancient observations. Instead, it provides a stunning layer of confirmation, revealing just how astute those early witnesses were. The specific beetle revered in Egypt is widely accepted to be Scarabæus caesar, a large, robust dung beetle native to the Mediterranean region and North Africa. When an Egyptologist reads the descriptions of Khepri in ancient texts and then an entomologist describes the behavior of Scarabæus caesar, the parallels are so precise they feel almost uncanny. The Egyptians may not have understood the science of metamorphosis, but their symbolic interpretation was rooted in a profoundly accurate reading of the beetle's most visible and dramatic behaviors. Let's start with the most iconic action, ball rolling. The ancient Egyptians saw the beetle meticulously shaping a ball of dung and then pushing it backwards with its hind legs. Entomology reveals this is a classic example of goal-directed behavior, primarily performed by the male of the species. The ball serves as a food source, but crucially, it also plays a central role in reproduction. Once a male has created a ball of a suitable size, he will begin his arduous journey, often rolling it a considerable distance, sometimes dozens of meters, to find just the right soft soil for burial. This journey is not random, it is a determined, persistent effort to secure a resource. The Egyptian analogy of this being like the sun's journey across the sky is not just poetic, it captures the essence of this relentless, directional movement. The beetle's path is often remarkably straight, even though it moves backwards, a feat that requires immense coordination and strength. Modern high-speed photography shows the complex legwork involved, a constant, tireless pushing and adjusting to overcome pebbles and cracks. The Egyptians saw this determined struggle against resistance and equated it with the sun god's nightly battle through the treacherous underworld. Science shows us that the beetle is indeed engaged in a vital struggle, one that ensures its survival and the creation of new life. But the most profound connection lies in what happens next, the event the Egyptians interpreted as a miraculous rebirth. After the male beetle buries the dung ball, a female will often join him underground. There, she will reshape the ball, compacting it and laying a single egg inside a specially crafted chamber within the nutrient-rich mass. She then seals the chamber, and both beetles may depart, their work complete. Inside that sealed nursery, the egg hatches into a larva, which remains safely enclosed, feeding on the dung provided by its parents. It pupates and finally metamorphoses into an adult beetle. When it is fully developed, this new adult must then dig its way out of the earth to begin the cycle anew. This is the moment the Egyptians would have witnessed, a fully formed, perfect scarab beetle emerging from the ground where a ball of dung had been buried. Without microscopes or a concept of larval stages, this appearance was nothing short of magic. It was spontaneous generation life emerging directly from inert matter. Their conclusion that the beetle was a symbol of self-creation and resurrection was a perfectly logical interpretation of the evidence available to them. Entomology confirms that the entire process is a powerful metaphor for transformation, even if the scientific details differ. The Egyptians correctly identified the core truth. From something considered waste comes new, vibrant life. Furthermore, studies of dung beetle navigation add another layer of awe to the ancient symbolism. Researchers have discovered that many species, including Scarabæus caesar, use celestial cues to navigate. They can orient themselves using the sun, the moon, and even the polarization pattern of moonlight to roll their balls in a straight line away from the competitive chaos of the dung pile. This is a critical survival strategy. Moving in a direct line ensures they don't accidentally circle back to where other beetles might steal their precious ball. The profound implication is that the scarab beetle is literally, biologically guided by the sky. The very celestial body it was symbolically linked to the sun is the same compass it uses for its essential life-sustaining task. For the ancient Egyptians, who saw the sun as the ultimate guide and ruler of cosmic order, this observable behavior would have been the ultimate sign of a sacred connection. It wasn't just a metaphor, it was a visible, daily demonstration of the insect's intrinsic relationship with the solar cycle. The beetle's life was synchronized with the heavens in a way they could plainly see, further justifying its status as a living god. This interdisciplinary dialogue between entomology and Egyptology enriches our appreciation for both the insect and the ancient culture that revered it. It shows that the symbolism of the scarab was not born from superstition or arbitrary choice, but from centuries of meticulous, thoughtful observation of the natural world. The Egyptians were exceptional naturalists. They asked why and found meaning in the patterns they saw. Modern science asks how and reveals the intricate mechanisms behind those patterns. When the two perspectives meet, they don't contradict, they illuminate each other. The scarab story becomes more powerful, not less, when we understand that its symbolic journey with the sun is mirrored by a real, biological journey guided by that very same light. It confirms that the ancient Egyptians were onto something profound, seeing a universal truth of death, transformation, and rebirth etched into the life cycle of a humble beetle, a truth that science continues to explore and explain. To truly appreciate the scarab's unique place in the Egyptian pantheon of symbols, we need to look at it alongside its peers, the other iconic emblems that define their worldview. Think of the Ankh, the Djed pillar, and the Eye of Horus as the foundational pillars of existence, life, stability, and protection. Each is a powerful, static ideal. The scarab, however, operates on a completely different principle. It is not a state of being, but a dynamic process, where the Ankh represents the sacred breath of life itself, a divine gift to be cherished. The scarab embodies the mechanism that generates that life over and over again. It is the engine of renewal, the force that ensures the gift of the Ankh is not a one-time event but a perpetual cycle. The Ankh is the destination, eternal life. The scarab is the journey, the difficult, ongoing work of achieving it. Consider the mighty Djed pillar. This symbol, often interpreted as the backbone of the god Osiris, stood for stability, endurance, and resurrection. It was the unshakable support that held up the sky and ensured the cosmos remained in order. Its power was in its steadfastness, its immovable strength. The scarab offers a fascinating contrast. Its power lies not in being stationary, but in constant, relentless motion. The Djed pillar is the solid ground upon which reality is built. The scarab is the active force that pushes the sun across that reality, ensuring the daily cycle that makes life on that ground possible. One provides the stage, the other is the lead actor in the daily drama of creation. They are complementary forces. The stability of the Djed allows for the scarab's transformative journey to have meaning, and the scarab's journey reaffirms the enduring power of the Djed's stability. Then we have the majestic Eye of Horus, the Wedjat, perhaps the most famous protective symbol of all. This symbol was believed to ward off evil, heal wounds, and offer restoration. It was a talisman of wholeness, making something broken complete again. The Eye of Horus protects what already exists. It guards against loss and mends what has been damaged. The scarab, in its most profound sense, is not about restoration but about outright recreation. It doesn't just fix a broken life, it generates a new one from scratch. The protective power of the eye is reactive, defending against external threats. The creative power of the scarab is proactive, bringing new existence into being from seeming nothingness. A person might wear an Eye of Horus amulet to stay safe from harm in their daily life, but they would be buried with a scarab to achieve a completely new form of existence in the next. One preserves the present, the other guarantees a future. What truly sets the scarab apart, what makes it so philosophically unique, is its foundation in a visible, natural process. The Ankh, the Djed, and the Eye of Horus are abstract concepts given form. Their power is divine, handed down from the gods. The scarab's power, however, was democratized by nature. Every Egyptian, from the pharaoh to the farmer, could witness its miracle daily. They didn't need a priest to explain the concept of rebirth. They could see it in the beetle rolling its ball and emerging from the earth. This grounded the most cosmic ideas in tangible reality. The scarab's symbolism of self-creation is also unparalleled. While Osiris was resurrected through the magic of other gods like Isis and Anubis, the scarab god Khepri was believed to have created himself from the primordial waters. This idea of creatio ex nihilo, creation from nothing, gave the scarab an ultimate, self-sufficient power that other symbols did not possess. It was the embodiment of an internal, unstoppable life force, making it a deeply personal and empowering symbol of one's own potential for transformation. What makes the scarab's story so uniquely compelling, what has allowed it to captivate imaginations for over 4,000 years, is its extraordinary ability to bridge the gap between the tangible world we can see and the profound mysteries we can only feel. At its heart, this is a symbol born from simple, diligent observation. The ancient Egyptians didn't need divine revelation to understand the scarab's power, they simply watched. They saw a small creature performing a Herculean task, rolling a ball with relentless determination, and then witnessed the apparent miracle of new life emerging from the earth. This was a truth anyone could verify, a natural cycle as reliable as the sunrise itself. Yet they had the genius to see that this humble, earthly process was a perfect mirror for the grandest cosmic events. The beetle's daily struggle became a parable for the sun's journey, its transformation a promise for the human soul. This fusion of the ordinary and the extraordinary is the scarab's secret. It grounds overwhelming concepts like creation and eternity in something familiar and understandable, making the infinite feel accessible. This layered meaning allows the scarab to speak to universal human concerns that transcend time and culture. The fear of death, the hope for an afterlife, the desire for meaning in the cycles of existence, these are not unique to ancient Egypt. They are fundamental questions that every human civilization has grappled with. The scarab offers a powerful, non-verbal answer. It doesn't just promise life after death, it demonstrates the mechanism for it. Its symbolism provides a model for understanding our own place in the universe, suggesting that our lives are part of a larger, regenerative pattern. This is why the symbol could be adopted and adapted by the Nubians, the Canaanites, the Greeks, and why it still resonates today. Whether interpreted through the precise theology of the Book of the Dead or the more general human yearning for renewal, the scarab's core message remains potent. It tells us that endings are followed by beginnings, that darkness gives way to light, and that from what seems like decay, new forms can emerge. This is a message of profound hope, one that is as relevant to a modern person contemplating their own mortality as it was to an ancient Egyptian preparing for the afterlife. Furthermore, the scarab's visual design contributes significantly to its enduring power. Its form is both simple and elegant, a clean, oval shape that is instantly recognizable and aesthetically pleasing. This makes it an incredibly versatile artistic motif. It can be carved from a common stone for a farmer's amulet or crafted from gold and lapis lazuli for a pharaoh's pectoral, and in both cases it retains its essential power. Its simplicity allows it to be stylized and reinterpreted across centuries, from the precise carvings of the Middle Kingdom to the abstract forms of Hyksos seals and the sleek lines of Art Deco jewelry. Unlike more complex symbols that can lose their clarity when simplified, the scarab's basic silhouette is unforgettable. This visual resilience has ensured its survival, allowing it to transition seamlessly from a sacred religious object to a secular artistic icon without losing its identity. The scarab also endures because it represents a way of thinking that we have largely lost in the modern world, a worldview where the sacred is deeply embedded in the natural world. The ancient Egyptians did not see a separation between the spiritual and the physical. For them, a beetle was not just an insect, it was a manifestation of a god. The sun was not just a star, it was a divine being on a celestial boat. This animistic perspective, where the entire cosmos is alive with meaning, is deeply appealing. In an age of science and technology where we often feel disconnected from nature, the scarab reminds us of a time when humanity saw itself as an integral part of a living, breathing, and meaningful universe. It invites us to look at the world with wonder again, to see the extraordinary in the ordinary, and to find cosmic significance in the smallest of creatures. The scarab challenges us to reconnect with that sense of awe, to recognize that the mysteries of life, death, and transformation are not abstract concepts confined to textbooks, but are woven into the very fabric of the world around us if we only take the time to observe. From the sun-baked earth of the Nile Valley to the glittering tombs of pharaohs, the journey of the scarab beetle is a testament to the breathtaking ingenuity of Egyptian thought. We began with a simple insect, a creature of the soil, and discovered how the Egyptians saw in its humble labor a reflection of the cosmos itself. The beetle's determined push of its dung ball became the sacred journey of the sun god. Its miraculous emergence from the earth became the ultimate promise of resurrection. This was not a superficial comparison but a profound philosophical insight, one that connected the most mundane aspects of daily life to the grandest mysteries of existence. The scarab shows us a civilization that looked at the world with wonder, finding divine patterns in the behavior of the smallest creatures and weaving those observations into a complex tapestry of religion, magic, and daily practice. It encapsulates a worldview where nothing was truly ordinary, where the natural and the supernatural were seamlessly intertwined. This symbol's power lies in its incredible versatility. It functioned simultaneously as a personal seal for a merchant, a protective amulet for a mother, a political tool for a king, and a magical key for the soul. It could be carved from common stone for a farmer or fashioned from celestial lapis lazuli for a pharaoh, yet its essential meaning remained accessible to all. The scarab was democracy in symbolic form, offering every individual a connection to the cycles of creation and the hope of eternity. Its endurance for millennia, its journey across cultures, and its resurgence in modern art and pop culture prove that the questions it addresses about life, death, and transformation are universal. The ancient Egyptians may have given the scarab its most elaborate form, but they tapped into a hope that resonates across time. The belief that from endings come new beginnings and that life, in some form, always finds a way to renew itself. So, the next time you see an image of this ancient beetle, whether in a museum case, a history book, or even a movie, I invite you to look at it with new eyes. See beyond the familiar shape and recognize it for what it truly is, a masterpiece of symbolic thinking. It is a tiny, carved stone that contains a universe of meaning, a key to understanding how one of history's greatest civilizations made sense of their world. It challenges us to find wonder in the everyday and to see the connections between our lives and the larger rhythms of the universe. Now, I'd love to hear from you. With its rich symbolism spanning creation, the sun, protection, and rebirth, which aspect of the scarab story do you find most fascinating? Was it its role in the weighing of the heart ceremony, its surprising journey through international trade, or its modern revival in Art Deco design? Share your thoughts in the comments below. Let's continue this exploration together.